Welcome to Girl Choose Yourself, where we're trading self-doubt for self-trust and settling for soaring. I'm Eimear, your host, and together we're building the confidence to create lives so deliciously bold that they scare us a little, but in the best possible way. Because life's too precious to stay cozy in our comfort zones. It's time to choose ourselves for lives that are fabulous and soulfully fulfilling. So let's go. Today, I don't know what's wrong with me. I keep recording and re-recording just the first few seconds of this episode. So now I've decided that whatever I say, I'm not going to re-record it. And it's sort of very much in line with a quote that I came across, well, it's a long time ago now. And it's attributed to Nietzsche that, and it's this: when we are tired, we are attacked by ideas we conquered long ago. And I'm mostly thinking with that quote about this idea that we're so often far too worried about what we imagine other people are saying and thinking about us. And like Nietzsche says, it sort of attacks us, particularly when we're tired or we're feeling overly stressed. I think we become quite vulnerable to this idea, this idea that we may have conquered intellectually long ago, but when we're a little bit fatigued or feeling vulnerable for some other reason, it somehow attacks us. And I think it's one of the biggest ways, it's one of the biggest obstacles to getting on with things and living your own life and taking chances. There was also, I think it was Ed Sheeran, who said, I can't tell you, I'm paraphrasing, I can't tell you what the key to success is, but I can definitely tell you what, the key to failure is, and that's trying to please everybody. And that's part of it, isn't it, when you're worried about what other people are thinking all the time. And I had just a reminder of this personally, and then quite a troubling example from my daughter on this topic just recently. So I want to just share those and then think about how we break free from that, particularly where we get entangled when our defenses are a little bit low or feeling a little bit vulnerable. Mine was a little bit humorous. I think I said in the last episode that I was off to the UK on this marathon madness that I found myself entangled in. And I was running, supposedly, the London Marathon, which I did. And, for a marathon, for any distance really that's up to like half marathon or beyond, you have to train for quite a while, particularly if you're starting from zero. So the actual running of the marathon is supposed to be, the performance. It's, the last phase. It's kind of, you get the results of all your training. And hopefully it'll go well. And often it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, for me, it didn't. It didn't go great. And for a number of reasons, medically, I wasn't feeling good, and had a couple of problems there that reared their head in the couple of days beforehand, in the 24 hours. So I wasn't at my best, and bottom line, it was miserable. Like, I wasn't enjoying it from like even just 8-10 miles in. I was like, this sucks. I'm having a horrible time and I don't feel well. And it was quite a bit hot. It was hot and it was all very, London, beautiful, cheering crowds, lovely, but miserable. I did not have a good time. Anyway, lots of lovely friends were supporting me, some there and some, tracking you on this app. So I finished in, it was over 6 hours. I think it was 6 hours, almost 20 minutes, which is long for a marathon. Like in some marathons, I would have been taken off the course. But if you're doing a lot of walking in a marathon, you may be around that time. But it was a lot longer than other marathons that I'd done. So, and I kind of gave in to that in the middle of it, going, this is the best I can do in the circumstances, and I don't want to cause myself any more damage. And so I did it. And then I was home. I don't know whether it was the next day home. I was staying at the friend, and I see that somebody who was tracking me posted a lovely message on one of the social media channels congratulating me, and they took a screenshot of the tracking app which actually showed my final time. And I was like, oh shit, I did not want to publicize that. And this was really, it was kind of funny because I was going, what? Basically, it was, what will people think? What will people think? What would people think about that really long time? And she's training all the time and she's traveling and she could have walked it in that time. And a very nice friend was saying, oh, to hell with it. It doesn't matter what time you did it and you finished. And I was going, you're absolutely right. And I'm very pleased with the decisions that I made on the day and all these other things. But there it was. I was concerned about what people might think of my fucking running time. Like that mattered. Then that would say something about me. And what it would say about me was something that would fit neatly under the umbrella of not good enough. You're doing all this training, you're not good enough. You still couldn't get a time? You still couldn't get your 4:30 or something? This was my imaginary sort of, or not so imaginary, this was my time that I wanted to achieve when I first started running, and I've never hit it and probably never will. But I was captured in this little spin for a bit, and then I let it go. And when somebody had posted that, that you can get, people can tag you, and then you can review a tag on Facebook to say whether you are going to allow that on your timeline. And I was like, and somebody said, well, you can just delete it, or you can just not share it. And then I said, you know what, fuck it. That's bullshit. I think I'm just going to, that is really nice of them to be tracking me and to be congratulating me. And I'm proud of showing up and doing it and getting to the finish line. And I'm not going to be caught up in this nonsense with myself. And I posted it, and that was fine. But it was interesting to see how quickly it got me that some people who I hardly know, or people who I know, might have some opinions on my time at a bloody marathon. That's just nonsense, doesn't make any sense. I have another story about how early it starts. I have a daughter who I'm sure I've mentioned a couple of times, and she was dealing with some issues in, the dynamics in high school. It starts before then, and middle school, of the peer group dynamics between girls. Anyway, little tricky social maneuvering going on, and my daughter finding herself in a group where a little bit of friction between one rather dominant personality, shall we say, and my daughter finding that she was not really having it as regards the way this girl was speaking about other people who were in that friend group who weren't currently sitting at their table. And so she stood up, just got irritated and said, I'm leaving, I'm going to sit somewhere else. I'm not going to sit with you if you're going to speak about other people like that. And she left. And she ended up going and sitting with another group of people. And when I first heard that part of the story, she was telling me as we were driving back from school, I was like, oh, well done. That's been brewing for a while. And you listened to your gut and your intuition, and it didn't feel aligned to stay there. And that's not what you're about. And so you left and you communicated that, and that's all good. And then she said that later in the day, she saw members of her friend group speaking to this person who she'd had the slight altercation with. And she began to feel fearful and uneasy. So by the end of the day, she had gone back to this person who she had sort of spoken out to and walked away from earlier in the day. And she apologized And she said she'd been feeling a little bit tense or whatever and didn't mean to offend them or something. Anyway, she smoothed it over. And the other person sort of said, oh, kind of met them sort of in the middle on that. And so that was that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I said, and why did you feel you needed to do that? And she said that she needed to basically smooth over the ruffled feathers, and basically it was so that there wouldn't be any negative consequences. And it really is, it's a fundamental need that we have to belong and to be included. We're wired, if you think about it from a neuroscience point of view, we're wired to care about social acceptance. It was part of that tribal acceptance. If you got expelled from the tribe, you died, literally. So we're really wired for that sort of cohesion and to make it work in the tribal settings. And her example was like for me, it felt almost visceral when she was describing it. I felt like there would be negative consequences, so I had to smooth that over. So I would still be in the group sort of thing, but I wouldn't have to be involved in some sorts of competing factions and wondering whether I was popular enough to survive this or powerful enough. I think that's it very raw when we're younger. Me as a 55-year-old woman kind of feeling what will people think, a lot less at stake for me. But it was still there. It was still troubling me enough to have that moment of pause and to have that sort of sudden intake of feeling vulnerable, that people had seen some data about me, my running time, that I felt uncomfortable about and felt that wasn't enough and I might be judged. It can be around for a really long period of time, worrying about what people think. And it can get us into trouble. It can get us into trouble if we decide that we're going to live our lives to make other people happy and comfortable and not rock the boat. And obviously, for my daughter, that's something that we're working on. She's working to develop, and it feels that you have a lot less power when you're younger and you're in that very closed social setting of a school environment where your options are somewhat limited and that you have to behave in a more, restrained manner, and you have fewer options than when we are older. But I think it's really worth thinking about where we are, worrying about what other people are thinking and what it stops us from doing, and what it potentially can stop us from doing. I know, and I've spoken about this before, and I've spoken about it in the books, that we can find ourselves on paths in life that don't feel like they really belong to us, or they're a good reflection of who we are, who we want to become, what we want to express in this world, because we are consciously or to a degree unconsciously acting in a way to please others or to meet standards that we think important to others or influences from our lives, either living or dead, would have approved of. Oh, your father would be very happy to hear that you've become a doctor or an engineer or an accountant. Whatever, there's this idea that there's a validation. And for myself, I think it's something that I'm constantly trying to free myself from and working on, is to not really shrink to fit the expectations of other people. In the book, The Little Book of Good Enough, I think it's in that book, I spoke about this idea of who are the people who really matter, whose opinions really matter. Because often I'm worried about, what will this other person think? And then I think a really good question to ask is, would I take advice from this person on how to live my life, this person that I'm concerned about what they might think about me? And the answer is usually absolutely not. I would not. And so what sometimes really helps me to get a clear view of the next step forward is to ask myself that question. When I take advice from this person on how to live my life, and then to have the people whose opinions of me really matter very clear in my mind. And for a long time, I had those written on a card that I kept in my wallet. But now I know exactly, obviously, who they are, and I don't need that reminder. But for a while, it was really helpful to have this physical reminder, and maybe it'll be helpful for you too. And I had a piece of card that was like the size of, business card in my wallet, on which I wrote the names of, and there were 5 people whose opinion of me or what I was doing mattered. So those were the type of people who I would take advice from on how to live my life. Those are the type of people who, and I mentioned one of them in the book Choose Yourself, when I was talking about how this friend of mine reached out to me about some behavior online from me, where she called me out and it mattered to me. And first of all, I was a bit defensive because I was really in my ego. And then I was like, oof, wait a minute, take a moment, take a breath. This is Karen. She's one of those people who, when she says something about what I'm doing, it matters. It matters a lot. Then I was able to zoom out a bit and disentangle from, a defensive, egoic position, and be able to see things more clearly and, change my behavior and change my stance. And so that's a really good question. Would I take advice from this person on how to live my life? And I think for my daughter, the answer was no in her situation. And for me in that situation about Karen, the answer was yes. So in that case, it was one of those situations where, when I think about what they will think, or when they express what they think, then that matters. But really, it's usually a very small number of people who will matter. And if you're unclear, write those names down. Have a think. Who would I really ask for advice on how I'm living my life? I think 5's a big number. It might just be 3. It might even be just 1. I also think that when I'm worried about just generally what will the big mass of people out in the world think about me, that's more relevant now when you think about social media. And if you, this is a podcast episode, I have no idea who might be listening to this, but they'll have a view. They'll have a judgment. They might think it's they won't get this far if they think it's shit. But people will have opinions about you and what you produce, what you create, if you decide to put things out in the world, like a simple post on social media, just opening a social media account, putting your photograph out there and having people like or not like it. I had a woman I know who was she's my age, and she decided to stop dyeing her hair. And lots of people had opinions about when she was posting pictures of her growing out her hair. So people are going to have opinions about you, and you don't have to you just have to be existing. You don't have to be creating things, just existing, and they'll have opinions. And if we can't find a way to immunize ourselves to a degree, I think it stops us from creating things. I know so many people who want to start a side hustle, to start an online business, to start a new venture, or just even to start a new activity, who would like to write a book, who would like to, run a 10K, who would like to, study something very different from what they're doing right now, and, get involved in music, whatever it is. And they're slow because they think people will go, what's she doing? Or what's he doing? That's a bit weird. Never going to be successful at that. I didn't know he had any talent for that. Or she's not really the right, I don't see her that way. Or people fucking love to have an opinion on shit that's got nothing, I'm cursing, nothing to fucking do with them. They're sitting on the sidelines. And I think the way that you have to think about it is to, ask that question. When I take advice from this person on how to live my life, write those 3 to 5 people or 1 to 5 people who really the answer to that question, would I take advice from them, is yes. And refer to that when you begin to worry about what other people might be thinking. Another thing that I find very useful is to practice saying no without justifying it. When somebody asks you to do something or they make a comment that they're expecting that you would have behaved in a certain way, just saying, no, I didn't do that, or I decided not to do that. And don't explain. Don't explain things to people. They're not one of those people. That's just another signal of being worried about what people think about you when you start over-explaining. The other thing I found really helpful is having a personal mantra that you fall back on. And I think I spoke about this last week when I was talking about something that keeps me going when I'm running, which is nothing to prove. Nothing to prove. And that's usually nothing to prove to all of the people who don't matter, in a very kind of positive way. When I say they don't matter, it's mean like, I'm not connected to you. Your opinion doesn't influence me, but I wish you well. I don't wish anything bad for you, but you don't matter in my decision making. Have your own mantra and think about what is that message that you want to send to yourself that will inspire you, sustain you, when you're taking a step into something that's new and unknown for you and that you feel a little bit of hesitation about, something that's going to nurture you and fuel you and kind of allow you to get that insular focus where you can not have your excitement contaminated by the opinions of others or just your own thoughts about what those opinions of others might be. Have a think about what that message is. And it might come like just like deep in your soul, that message of it's like, you deserve this. I deserve this. I'm worthy. I'm capable of so much more. I'm excited to try. That might be a powerful one. I'm excited to try. How might your life change if you were giving yourself that message? I'm excited to try. What great thing might come from this? And we all have wonderful gifts. And when we can let go of worrying about what other people are thinking or might possibly be thinking, we give a little bit of a little breath into those gifts, a little bit of life force into them so that they can begin to germinate and blossom, and we give them a chance. And the more chances you take, the better chance you have of creating something that's really going to be meaningful for you, that's really going to feel good for you. Because I was talking to a friend who I saw in the UK while I was there recently about this podcast, just as the latest creative venture. And she mentioned something to me about it. And I said, yeah. And it was really about, she knows me so well. And she says, I'm not quite hearing like fully who I know you are in the way that you're doing the podcast. And I said, I said, I get it. I get it. I'm finding my way a little bit. And it takes time. And you're not going to knock it out of the park in the first go. It's like that kind of comparing yourself to somebody else's highlight reel. So I said, I'm giving myself a little bit of grace while I explore it and I find my voice and I find my way in this new medium. But if I'm not prepared to put out, if I'm not prepared to try, if I'm not excited to try, I'm never going to land in that place where I feel like, yeah, this is fully 100%, me creating wonderful podcast episodes, because I need to learn. And it's the same for anything. Like if you're doing your first post on social media, you're trying to build your first or your second or your third business after a number of failures or, redirects. You got to be able to give yourself some grace. So excited to try. I'm excited to try. I'm going to leave it there for this week. I wanted this to be a shorter episode, which was supposed to be 20 minutes, but it looks like I'm running over a bit. And that's okay. That's okay. Giving myself some grace. Okay, stay awesome, stay wonderful, look after yourself, and I'll speak to you next time. Thanks so much for tuning into the episode this week. I hope you got a lot out of it, and if you did, please share it with somebody who you feel would benefit. And leave a review. Always greatly appreciated. Lots of free and paid resources to take things a step further. You can find those in the show notes. And hey, if nobody's told you this yet today, you are amazing, and the world is a far more beautiful place because you're here with us all. Stay cool. Bye.